When we say that women are more empowered, then their identity becomes in their empowerment instead of in who God created them to be. And for the guy, it becomes on, or do I earn more than her, or does she earn more than me? That becomes where your identity is. So whenever your identity is threatened, people lash out. Always, 100%. Anytime someone's identity is questioned, people lash out because they feel like you're coming to the core of who I am. You're attacking the core of who I am. So the first question shouldn't be, should women be empowered, or should men be empowered, or should, all that is secondary because we have to go down to the core of the issue. And the issue is your identity. Where does your identity come from?
Hi guys, thank you for joining once again. My name is Ivy Cachero, and if you're new to Grace and Glow Up, where have you been? Honestly, I'm glad that you guys have tuned in, and we are currently on episode 10. Guys, we're almost at the finale. Thank you for watching last week's episode, the part 1 and part 2. I hope you guys learned a few things there. The reason why I have no feedback on this episode is because I pre-record this episode. So, if you shared a few of your thoughts and ideas, we're going to discuss those later in future. But thank you so much for the commitment to continue watching, for the subscribers. I'm really genuinely trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. So help a girl out. I'm not really good at begging, but this is my attempt. But back by popular demand is a guest I had on episode 6. You guys enjoyed his content and the reels. You guys engaged. But most of you didn't even get to watch the full because the real views and the views on the actual episode don't match. So if you haven't watched episode 6 of the podcast, go and watch it. And of course, if you have, then you currently know who my guest is. We didn't get to finish our discussion because I think we had 1 or 2 questions discussed because, the content got juicy. And so today I'm here to make sure we discuss more about kingdom, manhood, singlehood, and, just general career-related conversations around men and young men in particular. And hopefully we could learn a thing or two. So, drum rolls. If you're watching now and you kind of guess who the guest is, comment section. But then, karibu tena, Mr. Barak.
Thank you very much. Yeah, like you had, my name is Barak. Glad to be back, and glad episode 6 was good. Enjoyed myself. I'm glad to be reinvited.
Yeah,
it seems I think I did a good job.
Yeah, and in fact, when the episode started, you were like, if this makes it to the internet, it made it. In fact, it overmade itself to the internet. So thank you so much, actually. I think one of the things I got from last week's the episode 6, I got a lot of nuggets because when I was rewatching it, I realized, I think I was in charge because every time I want to contribute, I'm like, no, that's not the chain of thought I was going with because I was learning a lot out of the discussion. And so hopefully that's what we could get into this week. Did you get any feedback as well? Because I'm sure guys messaged you as well.
Yeah, I got a lot of messages as well. And just following up on the conversations we had, maybe seeking clarity on a few things.
Yeah.
But I'm going to have a few conversations with guys next week. So I think this will be offline.
Off the record. Because we've had this conversation before. We're like, some things, because this internet is very dicey. There's some things that I think usually need foundation because people take things out of context when things are said off the record. So what I'm going to do as usual, because last time we didn't get to finish a few questions, I'm going to start. Last week I talked about a lot of emotional stuff, so I'm going on to relationship related issues here. There's been a lot of conversations online, right? And one of the things I think you touched on lightly was the masculinity thing in episode 6. And then now you sort of painted a picture of what kingdom manhood looks like and practical ways of showing up. And in terms of, you mentioned that in terms of family and, loved ones around you. But I want to discuss it in the perspective of dating.
Okay.
I think there's been an increase with regards to the trends around hypergamy, the dynamics of online dating, and then the shifting of gender roles, like the idea of women now being empowered and making a living. I feel like it's caused a bit of confusion in terms of what the responsibility of a man is in a relationship and now what the dynamics of dating are. But what I wanted to ask is, what do you think is a healthy view when it comes to, the shift? Because in my opinion, I don't think anything is changing. I think society is now grappling with what the reality of things are. But maybe from your perspective, what's a healthy way to look at that dynamic?
I think it starts off with you realizing, or us realizing as a society, that we are focusing too much on ourselves. And just looking at how the world is built, it's like everything is focused towards you. Your cameras are facing you. Sometimes when you switch on your camera, the first thing it goes to is yourself, because we're so focused on ourselves, and in a sense, it's affecting how we relate with other people. So by focusing on ourselves, we tend to find our identity in things that don't really matter. And so, for example, when we say that women are more empowered, then the identity becomes in their empowerment instead of in who God created them to be. And for the guy, it becomes on, or do I earn more than her, or does she earn more than me? And that becomes where your identity is set up. And so whenever your identity is threatened, people lash out. Always, 100%. Check on it online. Anytime someone's identity is questioned, people lash out because they feel like you're coming to the core of who I am. Yeah, you're attacking the core of who I am. So the first question shouldn't be, should women be empowered, or should men be empowered, or should as you're dating, should I earn more than him, or does he earn more than me? What do we do? All that is secondary, because we have to go down to the core of the issue, and the issue is your identity. Where does your identity come from? So, for example, you could be dating someone and you, Ivy, could be earning way more than them, and what happens when you lose your job? If your whole identity was pegged on that, career, on your career, what happens when circumstances change? And if throughout the whole time your identity was all based on what you do instead of who God created you to be, then it'll affect how you interact with everyone else. So if your identity is based on who God created you to be, it doesn't matter what circumstances change. It doesn't matter where you end up. Your confidence does not come from what you make, from what you do, from the things you have and the things you have achieved. Your confidence comes from who God created you to be. And so you actually start realizing that the value I bring to this relationship, or the value I bring to this marriage, is not the finances, it's not what I do, it's actually who I am with this person, is the value I bring, and that's the most important thing.
And I think the way you've said it is correct, because even when you hear how these conversations, every podcast is having these conversations, it's on the basis of very object-related perspective, like things, who does what, and because if you look at it from that angle, it'll be a never-ending cycle, because society is constantly talking about who should acquire what, what's the idea of success and all of that, and that if that's what people are pegging. In fact, me, I'm personally guilty of, not necessarily in the dynamic of relationships, it's only until maybe last year that I had a reflection of, every single time someone asks me, who are you? What's your name? You say Ivy. And then someone asks, so what do you do? You always start with your job, right? And so when you don't have one, and then someone says, what's your name? You say Ivy. Then they ask, what do you do? Well,
you start questioning
who am I?
And
to be honest, I've genuinely asked myself that question, and because during this season of, since I left my job, and then I've had a couple of situations where I was at an event and I was speaking at the event. Even when I was sending my bio, I was like, who am I?
Yeah.
And every single time someone said, okay, so what do you do? I'm like, I didn't know what to say, what I do.
Yeah.
But I've come to the realization that it's not even just a job. It's that low-key my self-worth was tied to what I can bring to the table.
Yeah.
And what that looks like could be anything that seems less of a burden.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as, as I said in the beginning, I don't like begging. So any single time I feel like I'm in a situation where I'm at the mercy of, I feel like I need to take my control back.
Yeah.
And it's because I think growing up, it was subconsciously fed into me that you need to cause less trouble for people to want to be to accommodate you subconsciously.
Yeah.
And so having to deal with that and now, get rid of that ideology, I've now come to the acceptance of, I'm good enough. I didn't have a job and still somebody said, you know what, you need to speak at my event. Or, you don't have a job title, but someone says, you're capable of doing this.
Yeah.
Or come help me with this. I'm running this business. Do you want to partner with me? Is because I get to realize that in situations where I don't work for the identity, people see me for who I am and appreciate that more than dynamics where I'm constantly trying to define it based off the way I see it.
Yeah, and then I agree with you wholly on that, where it comes to the place where we even attach your own value to the paycheck you get at the end of the month.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's, in a sense, there's a balance that marks who you are as an individual and marks what you can do and what you can achieve, or what respect you get from
and
everyone else, and what access as well people have from you. And I have 2 daughters and I love them to bits. And you've met them, and one of the things I love about these girls, and one of the things I hope that they will learn is, I know one day they'll start asking me, or they'll start saying, this is what I want to do when I grow up, or this is who I want to be when I grow up. And most probably it'll be linked to a career. And I hope I'll have the wisdom then to tell them, I just want you to be a kind person. I want you to be an honorable person. I want you to be a godly person. I want you to honor people. I want you to live peaceably with people. What you do does not matter. Because who you are is way more important. So right now, the work we're doing with them is teaching them who they are, the character they are, so that whatever job they end up in is not what defines them. And they don't find value in what
things
they do, in the things they do. There's this cliche, and the reason why cliches work is because they are often true. And the reason why cliches keep coming up again and again is because there's a ring of truth in them. And there's this cliche of you're a human being, not a human doing. That's who are you? Who did God created you to be? And who are you becoming as you live? That's the main question.
And it's the idea that character precedes a man. You talk about anybody. It's funny that we're talking about this, because about character. I was in a dynamic and we're having a conversation with someone close to me, an older person, and he said something that stuck out to me. He said, if you constantly have to, the identity you have, if this is who you think you are and you constantly have to apologize for not being that thing, then there is a lot that you need to reflect on in terms of who you are. Because when we're talking character, a lot of people have an ideology of who they think they are, as opposed to focusing on who they currently are to be better, because then you're able to work on building character. And it's interesting that he gave a good example of, because he is in Mombasa and they do business with the Arabs, in the Swahilis in Mombasa. So it's like every time he has to do a business with a person and they have to say, walai, or something walai, to mean, I swear to God. It's like, why do you have to swear to God? Why can't you...
Why can't your word be enough?
Yes, why can't your word be enough? That you have to threaten to include God to be your backup, because your character is not fit enough to stand for you.
Yeah.
Because if your character would open doors and opportunities for you. But in context to what you just said in modern dating, I think, if I'm being honest, sometimes, because we've had this conversation with a couple of my lady friends, and we're always, because guys are always saying, oh, women can't date men who earn more than them, or because of the concept of hypergamy, right? But I've always said that when I look at my circle of friends, my friends would easily marry a man who is kind, of good character, and has their best interests at heart, even if they had no money, as opposed to a man with money who treats them like. But unfortunately, it's what people fail to realize, that the dynamic of, if you show up, character is a flaw and the money is still lacking, you don't get to have an exception. You need to build, and sometimes I feel like if you build on character, doors sort of end up opening for you, not necessarily financially.
Yeah.
Opportunities will open for other things, because the Bible says it'll put you before kings, right?
Yeah.
So
It's funny because scripture teaches that love covers a multitude of wrong.
Yeah.
The world teaches money covers a multitude of wrong. So in a sense, you could forgive someone who treats you horribly, because that Swahili saying for, I'd rather cry in a Range Rover. Yeah, I'd rather cry in a Range than laugh on a bicycle. Like, it's the guys would rather do that, and where again it shows where your value is, where your identity is, where your, like, in a sense, we are so me-centered, self-centered, that even the first thing you do when a meal comes is to show others what you're eating, instead of...
I'm those guys.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
This is personal.
Rewind. No,
but I get what you're saying.
It's a sense of, I want to... I
guys,
want people to know...
I'm living nice.
Yeah, I want people to know I'm living nice.
Yeah.
Instead of, actually, let me be in this moment and let me enjoy this moment.
Yeah.
And let me be faithful to this moment right now, and be present.
Yeah.
And so it's, again, character is rarely Instagrammable.
Word. Caption.
It's for real. It's like when
we can never tell someone's character off, their social media posts.
It's not. Kindness is not Instagrammable. It's not. It becomes altruistic when you're trying to show people, oh, look, I'm giving someone something.
Yeah.
That's not kindness. You're giving to yourself.
Yeah.
It's when you're kind, when you're living a life that honors God, it's rarely possible for you to Instagram it, or it's rarely possible for you to capture it in a way that people will see. And so it becomes a problem where what we value, or what the world values, defines who we think we are, and it changes how we interact with people. And also it changes how we go into relationships. So the things we are looking for in relationships is things that fade away, or things that will fall off eventually.
Yeah. And it's also, when you look at, even because I think also these things stem from the way our societies are cultured. You go home and you tell your family, I've met this guy, and the first thing they ask you,
what does he do?
What's his name?
Yeah.
Where is he from?
Yeah.
Then what does he do?
Yeah.
Depending on those answers, it'll decide the trajectory of the next question. If the title is too good and maybe the paycheck doesn't align, then they just assume this is a well-to-do man. And I guess it sets the wrong expectation.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So yours, so if, let's switch the mindset. What is then a healthy, if someone is looking to date in this modern day, lucky for you guys, because you're not in this modern day struggle. What is a healthier way to date in this modern day? Considering, one, you mentor young men, what do you advise?
See, the first and foremost, it's, and this will sound so, again, cliche, because you're talking to a pastor, and the first thing he says is, by the way, get your relationship with God right. Honestly.
Yeah.
And I know that'll sound like, okay, that he's done his paycheck job, you know, like, you know, as in he's done the part for, but the truth is, the value you get in just walking with God, even for yourself, knowing who you are, changes so much, and it changes you as well. There's this couple, and they know I love this story, and I share this story a lot, and they know I tell this story. So there's this couple who, before the guy became a Christian, before the guy became a follower of Christ, they were fighting a lot, like they were fighting consistently. And then he became a Christian, and months later, they came for counseling because the chick, the wife, thought this guy has given up on the marriage because he was no longer fighting. But what had happened was, and the guy was telling me, is like, the thing was, every time she told him you did something wrong, he would be like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'll work on that." Yeah, or he would just come up and say, "Hey, I was praying about this and I feel like I was wrong here. I'm really sorry." And so for her, she's like, "My guy, what's happening? Who are you?" As in, he had changed so much that she thought their marriage was ending because they were no longer, like, he was no longer fighting for the marriage. The idea that we are fighting for it, we are fighting for this. And God had transformed him so much that things were different. And it's this concept of knowing that Paul writes it this way. Paul says, "Imitate me as I imitate Christ." That's one. Paul also says, it's better for you not to marry. But the reason he says that is because he knows how much opposition you get as a follower of Christ. And so he's saying, for those who are married, you will struggle when you see your loved one being persecuted or your loved one being used as ransom against your persecution or against your faith. So he's saying there is, you will love in a way that is beyond you. So if you're going into this, by then go all the way into this. So God shapes you as a man because he's the one who knows you. He's the one who created you. He's the one who will bring a good wife to you. The scriptures tell us again, a good wife comes from the Lord. So again, you remember that there's a value in knowing who you are as a person, and the only way you can know who you are is from who created you. Go back to the maker.
And I think because we, last week's episode was shared by Andre, and he shared as well as part of his story how him being distant from God and what sin was doing to his marriage. And I think understanding that you could also end up married, but if you don't have the intimacy with God, just like the story you've shared with your friend, you're going to struggle. And I think also one of the interesting things you share is a question that people constantly ask is the idea of, okay, fine, let's say I'm currently dating and when we're both not born again, and I end up now, I've decided I'm following Jesus. And we're dating, we're not married. What's pastoral advice?
Okay, let me take a step back first before I get to your question, because I need to clarify something. One, it's not that all Christian marriages are perfect. Two, it's not that, I don't want people to hear me saying that there are no people who are married, who are non-Christians, who are having a thriving marriage. There's so many who are having a thriving marriage. There are so many people who don't even know the Lord, who are even atheists, who are having a beautiful marriage. It happens. So it's not me saying that the only way is this. The difference for a Christian marriage, or the difference for a marriage that honors God, is it's a marriage built for eternity. It's not built for here. It's built for eternity. It's me constantly thinking that one day my wife will stand before God,
And given us
how am I preparing her for that meeting?
Yeah.
And for my wife to know that one day Barak will stand before God. How am I preparing him for that meeting? Or one day I will stand personally before God, the maker of everything, the creator who is righteous and just, and I will answer for how I treated my wife.
The gift he gave you.
The gift he gave me. And the question is not only how am I preparing her for that meeting with the maker of everything, it's also who will I be before him? Now, does that mean that I don't get it wrong? No. I get it wrong so many times. But there is also the knowledge that I can go back to God consistently, humbly, and tell him, by the way, I am constantly dying to self, making mistakes, but also coming back to you with my mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's the difference where
Yeah.
I'm learning as a follower of Jesus, and for a couple that is leaning towards following God and committed and submitted to Jesus Christ, the difference for them is that they don't only think about the now, they think about eternity as well.
Yeah.
Or at least they should think about eternity as well.
Because the lordship thereof is when you're submitted to God in the, as opposed to any other institution.
Yeah.
My belief is always that as opposed to when there is nothing, where it's our opinions that stand, there is something outside of us that takes preeminence above us. So there's a place where we stop arguing and we listen to somebody else, where it's not opinionated. And so you're sure you have a good captain steering your ship. And
you also have the amazing joy of knowing I can go back to the one who created me and ask him to change me. Like I can go like, God, this is a problem I have. You made me. Please work on this in me. But also there is a place of saying, God, you made my wife. You know her. And you know how this is hurting me. Deal with her. If she's your daughter, deal with her. Like there's that relationship you have, which is different so that's what I wanted to clarify first, where I'm saying it's not that because you're Christians, automatically your marriage will work. No, that's not it.
Even siblings.
Yes.
Who are from the same house, same parents, same DNA.
Same faith, same religion, they sometimes don't get along. It happens. So that's the first thing. Now to your question. The question was, what happens when
I'm dating someone,
you're dating someone, you are a believer, they are not they are an unbeliever.
And me, I've suddenly decided Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. So do I deuces to our love was fine. And
two things. One, like this is one of those things that it's just. But one, I often advise guys, if your values are not the same. There's
huge contention.
You might start at the same place, but it's like it's lines that are going in a different direction. And if your values are not the same, you might end up in contention. Now I say might because again, I know many couples that are
one is a believer and the other one is not.
That things have worked out. In the same way, I know many that things have not worked out. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is this. I love the way Pastor Ray, our lead pastor, says it. We had a conversation about this a while back, and he put it this way. He said that up until the moment you get married with this person, before you get married, up until that point, we will tell you not to do it. But from the moment you get married, we will be 100% behind your marriage. As a church or even as a pastor. Like my responsibility is to say, guys, listen, I wouldn't advise you to do this. But the moment you decide we're getting married, and to the point of you getting married, I'll tell you, by the way, this is not a good idea.
Are you still sure?
But from the moment you say I do to each other, I will be your greatest champion for your marriage, 100%.
It's interesting you say this because I was having a conversation with a lady friend of mine, And that's one of the struggles she's been having, right? Because she ended up marrying someone who was acting churchy, but maybe wasn't truly walking the walk, and so their marriage has been having issues, and so they've been doing counseling, and of course they were taking free church counseling, right? And she was like, at some point she had to tell the counselor, you know what, I'm done with this thing you're doing here, because based off what you just said, you'll be behind the marriage. I think she was going there to sort of get validation on like a way out, but the church just kept telling them of ways to make it work. And it reminded me of like there's a prophet, apostle or something. He was telling how he had a close member of his ministry who, I think he married one time. I think his wife passed away or something. And I think he remarried. And when he remarried, he's like, this guy, I left him single. I traveled. While he was there, this guy sends him a picture. He says, by the way, I've met this lady. And, this guy's thinking, how was it just a few weeks ago? The guy says, in fact, we've met and we've locked. I'm married. Of course, this guy was like, I could see what is wrong with this dynamic. But this man just told me he is married. He said, what I thought doesn't matter anymore.
Does not matter.
We will fight whatever warfare has come now.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Because the value is, your marriage is the value. Now, that doesn't mean that now, for you to get the support, you rush to get married. There is wisdom in a multitude
and
of
that's why you need to take the right approach
to it,
Yes. And I think there's a scripture that talks about how God takes covenants seriously. And that's why we shouldn't be making...
getting into promises to God and to each other as well.
Yes, exactly. Wow. I think I'm now really thinking through, because I've realized, even when I think about relationships where I've had like huge contentions, even within Christians, I think it's also because I think people always confuse while dating that values is, okay, you're Christian and I'm Christian, so our values align. But I've found that like you could have to be Christians. Maybe that's not the correct way, because sometimes I'm like, maybe it means people aren't living fully to those values. But there are those who, quote unquote, say they are Christians, but the value systems don't align with yours, yet you're also a Christian. So you get to realize when you have conversations around money or how you deal with relationships, friendships, this person's identity is built on these things being done.
It goes back to identity. It goes back. Okay, look at the story in Mark chapter 10, for example. The rich young ruler comes to Jesus and goes like, what can I do to achieve eternity or to enter into eternity? And Jesus tells him, you know the laws. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. Excuse me. And the guy says, I have observed all this since my youth. Everything you've said, I've observed it since my youth. And then Jesus tells the guy, okay, sell everything you have and give your possessions to the poor. And the guy is heartbroken completely, because even like you can think that at that moment he thought the way he was living was for God. Okay? Even how what he was doing to achieve righteousness, he pretended it was for God until Jesus pointed out to him what was more important than God. And it's the same thing with us. Sometimes we think we are followers of Jesus. Like you could be dating someone and their character and everything portrays and looks like they are following God, but actually there is something that they value more than God. And when that thing is touched, you will know their true character. When their identity is touched, you will know. Their claws will come out.
Yes, and you'll get to realize that's now where you keep wondering. This ideally would have been a petty issue, but it's a big issue in the relationship because it's attached to
identity.
Because the person is thinking, if you say I'm not this, so who am I? What am I supposed to? What are you saying about my whole entire life where I've lived believing this?
It's okay for you to go through that, because sometimes we assume that because you are a follower of Jesus, or because you're a Christian, or because you're a mature individual, that when someone points out a flaw, you will take it and change immediately. No, that's not true.
No,
sometimes you will lash out. Sometimes you will want to defend yourself. Sometimes you will want to rationalize it. Then that's okay. That's totally fine. It's just what you do after the emotions have simmered down. Yes. Yeah.
Like, well, now let's think about this rationally.
Yeah.
I hear you. So, there's an interesting study that was done by Pew Research last year, and it said that a record of 63% of men under 30 are single, up from 51% in 2019. So the percentage of men single now under 30 is higher, as opposed to before, where people married younger. So the question is, what do you think is the reason why young men have fewer relationships now than previous generations?
Do you know how much it costs to get married?
I mean, the wedding or
the wedding? I
mean,
just think about that. Like, for some people, it's just a simple financial decision. They're just like, by the way.
So if we say let's go to the AG, Attorney General's office, we sign these papers, we'll get a man of God.
Yeah. So one of the things I tell guys is the most important, and I've done weddings like this, okay? Yeah. I've done weddings where we have two witnesses. The man,
especially during COVID.
Yeah, not even during COVID, even after. I've done weddings where, when was this? 4 weeks ago, I did a wedding where it was bridegroom, witnesses, cameraman, and me. 6 people. In my office.
I'm not going to
That's
do
what
that
we did.
On me. I want a small one.
But for them, the idea was, and it's something we advise couples. We're like, by the most important people are the two of you. Yeah. Those are the most important people. Everyone else can see pictures online, to be honest. Everyone else can see pictures online. And it's totally fine. It is totally fine. Let me tell you, something else I tell couples is, and I tell this to brides just before the wedding, I tell them, I promise you, it will go wrong tomorrow.
Okay, that I'm okay with.
No. Like, for real, you're saying that now. But I'm telling you, when you walk down the aisle and you're thinking, I wanted purple flowers, what are these lilac things I'm seeing? And the dude is just like, by the way, they're the same color. They're the same color. And sometimes...
Even now I'm what?
Sometimes we are so focused on the wrong things that we miss the day. Yeah. We miss the moment. Yeah. And sometimes couples spend so much on the wedding and miss investing on their marriage.
Yeah, there's that.
Yeah, and it becomes like someone goes like, I genuinely do not have the resources to marry right now. I do not have the resources to date right now. I would rather work on building my portfolio, quote unquote, so that when I am meeting someone, you remember the questions you said people are asked?
Hypergamy.
Who is he? Where is he from? How much does he earn?
Yeah.
The guy is like, okay, on the first 2, I am nothing. And then you're asking me how much I'm earning. No, I'm not doing this. So again, guys are just shying away from, not the responsibility, they're shying away from the shame of not being enough. Yeah.
Oh, wow. And guys, it's not like we want big weddings, but oh my God. Let me tell you, I honestly agree. Okay, I see where you're coming from. And to be honest, I'll speak for myself because I've spoken to, I'm not sure about other people, but now after attending so many weddings and actually living out of Kenya, I genuinely, just a disclaimer, if I end up having a big wedding, scratch what I've said here. It's not because of me. But I've always imagined, like, I'd want like a small, intimate wedding.
Yeah.
Somewhere like in Greece or Fiji, where I'll send 1,000 invites and only like 50 people make it.
Yeah, because you've already weeded out guys. Like, you've already said Fiji. And in my head, I'm like, where is this Fiji place?
I'm like, it's visa-free for Kenyans.
Yeah. So, I have a pal who charged for his wedding.
I charge for my birthdays. I might as well charge for
No,
that.
this guy charged for his wedding. He did a ceremony, simple ceremony, and then for the evening reception, he told guys, this is where it's going to be. This is how much the tickets are, and guys showed up, and he made so much money from that. They put a deposit for their house.
Guys, since you pay for my birthday, you might as well just pay
and
for
think
reception.
about it. It becomes like, instead of a day becoming a day of debt, it becomes actually a day of blessing.
And it's an easier way to like also gift someone. You know, instead of people just buying you things you don't want.
Yeah.
Sofas that look funny.
Yeah. Now, for the record, this is a pal of mine who did this. I'm not recommending that this is how we do things from now on. Please do not go and say, Pastor Barak said I have to charge for my wedding. No, that's not it.
And I'm sure it works in other cultures.
It
I
does.
personally would wish that, like, I'm blessed enough to find it. One of the things, though, I'm sure is I never want to be in a situation where I take a loan to get married.
Yeah.
And secondly, I don't want to be in a situation where I have to borrow from people, like committee. No, I don't.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the reason why even people get into this type of situations.
Yes. And again, that's one of the reasons why people are not getting ready to marry. Because there are many other reasons.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons could be a very cost-effective thought where someone is just going like, by the way, I'm not willing to date. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to compete with what is out there on social media. That's not what I'm going to do. I would rather just live simply, and until I get to that place,
I'm able to accommodate. One of the things I think I appreciate with men who are very aware is men who are, I am not in a position to be selfless for somebody else and put somebody else before me. And therefore, until I feel like that's the kind of headspace I'm in to marry, I appreciate someone who's that way than a person who's winging it out here, you know, experimenting and deep down. And I think those are the people who sometimes I'm like, if you deep down know, like, this is not your thing, there's a bunch of other, you know, women who also, this is not their thing. You guys can just form a WhatsApp group, meet there and do a mingle instead of heartbreaking women and men out here.
But the thing is, marriage is a constant sacrifice. It's a constant sacrifice of you dying to self.
Yeah.
And so if you're not willing to do that, if you're not ready to do that,
there's no need.
It's the same, you will notice it in relationships as well. If you're not willing to die to self, if you're not willing to say, oh, by the way, I made a mistake, or I blundered, I fumbled, and working on who you are.
Resolve.
Because that's what marriage often is, and relationships often are people holding up a mirror to you to show you who you are, instead of who you think you are. Because there's a way we think of ourselves, and when you get married, someone actually shows you who you are. In one way or the other, and so it becomes you constantly dying to self. That sounds horrible, but that's what it becomes.
You know what? I think I said this in another episode, where one of the things I've appreciated, and I know a lot of people say, you know, I wish the first person you date is the person you actually marry. Well, there's a good thing to that, because, well, it's the same mirror that's been up a long time. But one of the things that I do appreciate with the relationships that I've been in, there are not that many, guys, I'm just saying, friendship and romantic, is that the extent to which I've grown, no amount of individual self-work would have done. Because sometimes I feel like I've made progress, I've been working on myself for like 4 years, and then I meet one guy, and even just in the process of like dating, talking, and I'm like, this is too much. Because I get to realize, I thought I was good with communication, and then now I'm like, am I not good with communication? Or I thought I was patient, and I realize I get easily agitated. It's like one of the best ways of growing, I highly recommend, I think, is in relationship. Like, if you want, the fastest way to growth is in the dynamic of a relationship, as opposed to like when you're single.
Both in the sense that, one, you need to love yourself enough to change. And to want to change. And you need to love the person enough to want to change for them as well. And sometimes people will tell you, don't change for others. That's selfish
Yes,
advice.
yeah.
We are constantly evolving people, and we have to consistently change to grow, because that's what growth is. Growth is
Yeah.
constantly changing, or changing as you learn new information. Staying the same is actually stupidity, because you're learning new information both about yourself and about the world, and choosing to stay the way you are. It doesn't work that way.
And then also what it does is the opportunity to change. Sometimes we don't realize how good that change benefits us. For example, I was once in a relationship where, and I'd want your take on this. I was once in a dynamic where I realized that in the dynamic of the relationship, I would point out things like, not even directly related to me, like how I'd see the person talk to somebody else, and I'd be like, you need to work on your communication. And I'm like, no, I know how to articulate myself. But I'm like, you don't realize that your facials and your demeanor look a certain type of way. And then there is a way you say things that sounds very condescending. And this is to your peers at work. And, so I'd say it, and this person, I think, used to think that maybe I'm reflecting something about our dynamic and using the work situation as a caveat. But what ended up happening is one time we're just chilling, and then he's had a meeting with one of his bosses, and he comes to tell me, oh, by the way, I had a conversation with our director, and he told me that in the progress I need to do for this managerial position, I need to work on my communication.
Interpersonal skills.
Yeah. And he was so excited, like he's just received new insight. And I couldn't celebrate. And I was like, why? I've said this for almost 6 months. Why did it need to be said by a man in authority for you to take it into consideration? Give me a man's point of view.
It's not about a man's point of view.
Yeah.
It's just that there was a paycheck attached to that advice.
Okay.
It all goes back to identity, where it becomes the work he's doing on communication. There is a value addition to it.
There'll be a reward for it.
There'll be a reward for it. It's not, I'm working on my communication.
To be an all-round good communicator.
Yeah. I'm just, for example, with my horrible communication, I ended up dating you. Why do I need to work on it?
Wow.
But then now this company is telling me for me to go to the next place, I need to work on my communication. There is a reward attached to it that is greater than the reward, unfortunately, than the reward he had attached to working on the same thing when you told him.
When it's relational.
When it's relational. So it goes back to
identity.
It goes back to identity. What do you value the most?
Based off what you just said, can I conclude that men understand consequence more than...
I don't think it's an issue of men.
Really?
It's an issue of... There are people who will understand consequences more, and they will make decisions based on that. On consequence. Sometimes we try to categorize things and say things like men do this, women do that.
Because honestly, personally, the reason why I've generalized it, no offense, is because I experience this with men more than I do with women.
Because bad behavior is cumulative, good behavior is not. And I'll explain what I mean. And I'll explain what I mean. What I mean by that is, again, it's when you meet a dude who's horrible at communication, and you meet a second one, and a third one, and a fourth one, in your mind, it's men are horrible at communicating. But when you don't remember the times you met someone who was very clear in their communication. No,
I have. Those ones I've met. And usually, the ones I meet who are good at communication were not romantically involved. As in, I feel like it's... In fact, even when I'm talking to my friends, I mean, this puts you in that bucket. But usually when my guy friends are asking questions in terms of what I think on specific things, I'm usually saying I'm very aware how much weight what I have to say might hold, as opposed to what their spouses would do, depending on personality and the dynamics of their relationships, right? Not just general. And the reason is, they subconsciously, in some of the dynamics, they have a bias in terms of she's out to get me or counter me for something. So there's the lens to which the information I'm giving that's not new. If it's given by their spouse, it's like, oh, so you're trying to tell me.
Yeah.
But when I say, they're like, okay, there's nothing for this person to gain. So it's taken more receptive. And when I say, it's like, oh, even my wife said that. And I'm like, okay. Why are we discussing this now, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the reason why I say that. It's not because I have the time I have this challenge is not like men non-romantic relationships. It's in the dynamic of relationships.
Yeah, okay. So I see what you mean by that, and I also see that I wouldn't say. Let me backtrack a little. I wouldn't say that men understand consequence more.
Yeah.
I would say that there is more placed on the shoulders of men.
There is more placed on the shoulders of men.
There is more expected.
Okay.
So when someone doesn't do what is expected of them, it's called out more when it's a dude than it is when it's a lady. So a man who chooses not to be present is a deadbeat. Yeah. But a chick who chooses not to be present is pursuing her dreams and go girl, and you're empowered. Power, girls rule the world and all that. So there is a different dynamic or a different opinion of the two sexes when it comes to those things. So I don't think it's men understand consequences more. Yeah. It's just that the consequence may cost more for men. Maybe, I don't know. But again, I've not thought that through enough for me to stand on it.
Yeah. This will pin this discussion another time. And in fact, if you have your 2 cents, because this is a question I've ambushed.
Yes.
We had it planned for this conversation. So it's a discussion on the fly. So guys, let me know what your thoughts are on the subject, because it's something that I introspect with, and what I just said is based off my opinion, so it's of interest. But since we've talked about romantic relationships, a question before I segue into what the takeaways, I wanted to ask in the dynamics of friendships. So there's some insights that were shared by, I'm trying to find where these insights came from, that says many men's friendships revolve around shared activities rather than emotional connection, leading to isolation as life changes. And I'd relate this statement to, have you seen the South African, there was a video, a deep video of a guy who's watching a football match with his friend, and his friend comes, hey, you're good. And then they keep repeating this over and over, but apparently one of them was dealing with something, and it's towards the end of the video, then that's clear. But all through, they were hanging out, they were talking, they were celebrating every time there was a goal, but there wasn't depth for them to be able to pick out that this man was struggling. Now, is this something you agree with? And if it's not, what would you say maybe consciously are the active things that, I'm going to say a man, because I think women have figured this thing out. Although, we have our own challenges. Yeah. What would you say are active ways of building deeper connection, deeper friendships? Now, this is friends, not romantic. Yeah. And if you agree with the statement.
So it's very easy.
Yeah.
If you're brought up in a society where every time you show emotion, it's counted as weakness.
Yeah.
It changes how you show emotion. If you're brought up in a society that somehow you're told that's not how men act, or when you cry, you're like, oh, that's not what men do.
Yeah.
When you don't have money, no, men provide.
Yeah.
When you when someone is attacked, you're like, you didn't protect, you're not a real man, you didn't fight. Yeah. But when you fight, you're not a real man, you're not gentle. Like so it changes how you approach the world. You're constantly caged even around your relationships, your close relationships. And it changes how you interact with the world when you are constantly trying to fit a mold that has been spoken over and over.
It becomes your reality.
It becomes your reality. And again, goes back to the question of identity. Where does your identity come from? And what defines who and what a man is in our society today? And so it's very easy to say that men don't have deep conversations. But again, it's a general statement because guys have deep and amazing conversations.
I personally...
Yeah.
So the reason I'm only saying this is when I think about because majority of my friends,
dudes,
male gender,
and
I do have deep conversations with them. That's on a friend's level, and I'm not quite sure whether it's because I am naturally very inquisitive, and I don't know whether it's because I'm a lady or I don't know. I just tend to ask a lot of questions, so I'm trying to think: does that have to do with anything?
No, it's when someone is comfortable with you, they'll open up.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with dude relationships. When guys are comfortable with each other, hanging out to watch football is such an important thing. Or hanging out to go and just eat meat or play golf. Those are important things because they build the bridges towards having those deep conversations. The difference is, for ladies, you guys will say, let's meet, let's talk, let's do all these things. But they tell a dude that, you're like, by the way, what are we doing? What is this? However, let's go to the garage. My car needs fixing. And while we are there, a conversation will come up. We had not planned to do that, but that will happen. And those happen. And so there's a difference between how we are wired in terms of wanting to have conversations. Now, there are dudes who will hang out to talk specifically about things. Yes. Yeah, it's there, but then it's not what we're taught to do.
You say that, you know what, even when you look at like when people sell these events, like we work on yourself, grow, I don't know what, men don't come. If you say the show is for women and like sold out, but when the events are done for, and I think based off, there is... in fact, I sent you some. I think I sent you the reel about. I don't know whether I forwarded you this. I share so many of these, but the reel was about why. And I'd asked you the question around men and women percentage coming to church.
Yes.
Yeah. And the context was there's a video that I had seen, a clip. I don't know if I'll be able to put it here because I don't know about copyright things. But like the video, the lady was being asked, it was on Hardly Initiated podcast, and the lady was asking the guys like about church attendance. They're like, do you guys go to church? And then, they talk about God, but, one of them is like, here, no, there. And the other guy said, yeah, sometimes, but I stopped. And then the thing is, they said they stopped going. They go for specific meetings with guys, but they don't do church. And they feel like the church is very emotionally geared. And so they just... and I wanted to hear from your perspective, no bias because you're a pastor.
Yeah.
Do you see any truth to this?
So... I will try my best not to go into statistics and pastoral things, but late 90s, early 2000s, there was a huge move towards a more masculine church because there was an idea that the church was becoming extremely feminine. And if you listen to the music, if you listen to even the lyrics in the music, it's very different. If you compare
now or back then?
Now, back then especially, but more now, where if you look at how David writes the Psalms or how the psalmists write the Psalms, and we look at how the music is today, it's a bit different. So there is a sense of how we I don't know what it is, but I agree that there is a sense of the church can be a bit more. There are more women in church sometimes in some churches than there are men. That happens.
Yeah.
However, it's again. Here's the thing, and I'll put it this way. This is the best way to put it. The best way to know where God is calling you to serve in church or in ministry or anywhere is to see what annoys you about the church. So if you walk into church and you go like, oh man, that sound is horrible.
Yeah. Join
God is calling you to solve that. It's really
join
easy.
tech or
And so if you walk into church and you feel like, oh, this place is too feminine.
Yeah, create an atmosphere where it's accommodative for men.
What does it mean to be too feminine?
That's the thing, right? I said anywhere where people healing. I don't want to use this language here because it can be misunderstood. But the healing nature is feminine. You know, the
question is does it mean that when I am vulnerable, I am feminine? Does it mean that when I surrender to God, I am feminine?
Oh yeah, then
does it mean that
it could be?
So it could be the language around what it looks like to be broken before God is what people maybe are ascribing it to being feminine, or maybe they're being repelled by that language. But if you're saying
they also
that,
mentioned that it and sometimes I'm like, maybe it's the churches people go to. It's like there are no practical like solutions to their problem. And I think they mentioned this. I'm not quite sure, guys. You go find out for yourself. And I'm just trying to remember, I think the end of the video, I think they mentioned something to do with, if I go for a men's meeting or something, I'll be plugged on a business. I'll be plugged on some actionable things. But when I come to church, it's like, okay, a good massage here and there. Then I'm like, well, now I still need to make money. But I think,
again, it goes back to identity. It goes back to that. It goes back to the bottom line where the value you're getting, the value you want to get from this meeting is how does it affect my bottom line instead of how does it change eternity? How does it change my time in eternity? We're worried about making investments in the wrong bank account. Like we are making investments for now instead of making investments for eternity. So you're thinking, I want to hang out with these people because they will give me a business idea. They'll give me connection so that the next few months I'm okay. Whereas church, we're like, guys, I'm not worried about your next 2 months. I'm worried about where you're spending eternity. And that's a plug I'm giving you. That's a plug I want you to connect to. That's a change I desire for you. It's
and
not
if you receive that change, you'll receive the change here. Because,
and also, it makes it different for you. If you value your relationship with God, it changes how you do business. It changes it completely.
And it can't be fun. And it doesn't, because I think people have a misconception that the godly way is not as quote unquote successful, or
it won't be. No. Truthfully, it will not be. It will not be as successful because it goes against the system set up in the world. So, for example, it makes no sense that the first thing Matthew does after becoming a follower of Jesus is
to leave everything
and to throw a bash so that his pals can meet Jesus as well. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that the first thing Jesus tells the tax collector, my guy, tonight I'm going to dine at your place. And then the guy says to Jesus, I will sell everything. I will pay back everyone I owe something, and I will pay them double. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make financial sense to do those things because your value is not in the things you own and the things you have. Now, will people agree with that statement? No. Will it rub people the wrong way? Most probably it would, because again, doing things the godly way will not always work out the way you want, because working out the way you want may not align with what God desires.
So the success version goes back to you might be successful, but the success identity has to be aligned with the kingdom identity of success. So if you're basing that as your success benchmark, then, because I am always, one of the things that has been in my spirit is that may you prosper as your soul prospers. And that even when we talk about it, when God talks about it is I who gives you the means to make a living. There's so many blessings that are in there that as the thing that we fail to understand is that is if you are in the kingdom, you can only if you follow in alignment with what God's plan is, then you have you walk in alignment to receive the blessings. Because in Deuteronomy, in my episode 8, in episode 8, I did a discussion around obedience and idolatry. And reading Deuteronomy 28 and the blessings of obedience and the curses made me just realize how walking in alignment with God, which is ideal that's what should be the definition of success, has a lot of consequences on what we even consider money and other things.
And if we could just touch on that briefly, the question is, even when you read something like Deuteronomy, the question should be, do I want to do this to honor God or for my relationship with God, or am I doing this so that God can bless me? Which again goes back to the bottom line, where your value is. That's one. Two,
who's the king?
Yes. And then two, look at Paul, for example. Let's go back to Paul briefly. Paul goes into prison. Paul loses everything, basically. He lists out his qualifications and says, this is who I was, this is what I'd achieved, this is what everything I have done, this is who I had learned under, or who I was a student of. And he says, at the end of the day, I counted it all as rubbish. Nothing, absolutely nothing, just to honor God. And so if perchance you had the chance to talk to everyone else who was around Paul at the time, they would have thought that Paul was a failure. This guy has made it.
No, afterwards they would have thought he'd failed.
Yeah, the guys who knew him
when he was at his peak,
and then saw him in prison writing letters, they would have been like, this guy failed.
He was. We used to know this guy.
Yeah, we used to know this guy. This guy was amazing.
He used to be in his posh.
But for Paul, his identity was not in the material things. His identity was but to live for Christ. That's what I want. That's what I desire. And because that's what he wanted, on every metric, Paul's life was a failure.
Oh, yes.
On every metric. Like, if you look at the way we view things today, he was a successful lawyer. He's not anymore. He was a good student of the best teachers at the time. He's not that anymore. He was on the high rising path to Pharisee life. And then he chooses to be a Christian who is living for God, being shipwrecked, being jailed, being constantly...
people's houses.
Yes. Yeah. And according to what people think, that's not successful. But according to what God thinks, Paul was very successful.
Yeah. Guys, again, you see, these are just 3 questions. And episode 10, we're wrapping up episode 10, and Barak still has nuggets. What shall we do? Guys, thank you so much for watching. And then thank you so much, Barak, for coming, because now I feel like maybe let's see season 2 where we shall place you. I think Barak should have even just been a co-host at this point. But thank you so much for honoring, because I'm learning where some of my ideologies are and the 2 cents there from a brotherly perspective and from a theological perspective. And so I appreciate it. I hope you guys also appreciate it. I've done my best 2 times in one episode, because I think this might be a part 1 and part 2, depends on how this goes. So you might have 3 videos, and thank me. But this time, watch. And I'm trying to get to 1,000. So please share with as many people. Like, share, and subscribe. As usual, share your nuggets. Follow Barak on Instagram. His Instagram handle is on the page. And if you have any questions, thoughts, feedback on what you'd want to see see on season 2 and also things we could do better on the podcast. We're all learning and growing on this platform. So feel free to share. And I can't wait to see you on the season finale. Thank you so much.